Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, it's a pleasure to stand along with my colleagues and indeed every member in this House and speak in support this time, Mr Speaker, of the Court's Remote Participation Bill. And I do want to, along with others, acknowledge the part that the Minister changing his mind and listening to the debates. And I also want to acknowledge certainly Kennedy Graham from the Green Party, who along with us at the Select Committee shared our view, and also the ACT Party, who were very, I know, listened very, very carefully to the arguments, and I know did play a part in the Minister's change of mind, or indeed the National Party's change of mind, and of course also the Māori Party. I do want to acknowledge Chester Burrows, who I think did do a very good job of chairing the committee. What is really important at any select committee is that submitters are treated with absolute respect and that they know that their voices are heard. Now, I think the most probably compelling submissions on this bill at the Select Committee were those from the Human Rights Commission and from the Law Society, who raised the concerns initially, because probably initially when the bill went through its first reading, that certainly yes, in terms of access to justice, in terms of efficiency, there were some very valid arguments. But it was certainly the Law Commission who was so strident in their opposition to remote participation without consent not being required. And it was certainly their submission that raised our concerns and alerted us, and certainly in the Labour Party, as to why it was really important to have further protection. And we talked in earlier debates, Mr Speaker, about whether we used a trial period, which, as David Parker pointed out earlier, that I think it's in the UK, there is a trial period, because when you are getting into new technology, and it's really important that these things are tested. And as David Parker said earlier, that there are in many other countries, consent is generally required for the use of the technology. And I think if we look, Mr Speaker, I can remember, and I'm sure many members in this House around my age will remember when answer phones first came into being used, how difficult it was for people to use them. It's that adjustment as we move forward for people to feel at ease. And we had it with leaving a message on an answer phone, and as other speakers have said, the difficulty at times for submitters when we hear through remote participation, and that many submitters are a little more nervous, they are a little more uncertain, they can't see, and indeed most people currently all feel much more at ease in being able to speak in person. So I think that when we look at whether it's from the accused perspective, that certainly, as David Parker very eloquently outlined, many instances where the accused could be disadvantaged, not being able to see what is happening with the jury, not being able to see the body language, not being able to know what's happening between the counsel before the within the court situation. It could really be quite a disadvantage. And also, of course, from the victims, the right of the victim to face their accused. So, Mr Speaker, taking all of those things into account, being able in a trial situation for the accused to actually for consent to be required is a really important thing. And I'm really pleased, as I said before, that all members of this House, every single party in this House, has acknowledged that that is important, and thank you very much, Dr Chowdhury, has acknowledged that's important, and let's face it, it was at the 11th hour. The Minister, it was a handwritten amendment that the Minister put forward, but that is what democracy is about. It is about not being too proud to say, yep, we did get it wrong, or this can be improved, and we should listen and we should change it. And I know that, in fact, I've seen a media release from the Human Rights Commission who were very, very appreciative of the change of heart from the government, and I know that indeed so are the members in the House who raised the concern or who supported their concerns at the Select Committee. So, Mr Speaker, we do know that these audio-visual links, though, despite the fact that now consent for a trial is required, are actually going to be a real asset in terms of court processes, and that is something that we all know is going to, everybody in this House supports. We want to see situations where the justice system isn't held up, that there aren't unnecessary delays, because we know that many, many victims, when we held our inquiry into victims' rights in the last term of government, and I want to acknowledge Nandal Tanshos, who put forward that inquiry into victims' rights, and we learned a lot during that inquiry. We learned a tremendous amount. What we learned is that victims needed more support, more information, and that's why Labor introduced the 24-hour helpline where victims had access to information. But also what they did tell us is what was particularly upsetting for them was court delays, was that when they had in their mind that they were going to be going to a hearing and then there was a delay. So anything that helps the efficiency of progress in the court has to be good for victims. But of course, having the right to face a victim having the right to face their accuser to face the person who is accused, who has done them harm in some way, is also another very important part of justice. So what we want to do, what we want to see in our judicial system, is for justice to be served. And this bill, with the amendment that has been supported by all parties in this House, Mr Speaker, goes a long way. So it's a pleasure to speak in support of this bill. Thank you.
I call Dr Kennedy Graham.